Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Cole here, and today I wanted to talk about a very interesting discussion that's been happening in the gaming industry over the last couple of months about whether or not Microsoft is monopolizing the industry through their purchase of Activision Blizzard. Now, I know that some of you might hear that and immediately think that this is kind of old news and that there's not really much reason to talk about this anymore because the deal has essentially gone through, and again, this is news from a couple months ago. However, as of about a week ago, there is a sort of phase 2 investigation that is starting primarily in the UK because they do not believe necessarily that this deal is completely right for the industry or that it won't monopolize the industry. So I just wanted to present some of the discussion, give my 2 cents, and maybe hear some things from you guys about what you might think. Make sure to wait until after you finish the video before you go and comment your opinion on it, because some things that I present here might end up changing your view on it a little bit. So just don't be that guy who comments before something is presented that goes kind of directly against that or for it. So the phase 1 ruling on the investigation issued on September 1st said that the merger may be expected to result in a substantial lessening of competition within a market or markets in the United Kingdom. This obviously meaning that if Microsoft were to own Activision Blizzard and King, who is also part of this deal but they don't get talked about very much, that would result in far less competition in the games industry and that other companies would be essentially forced out and Microsoft would almost dominate the market by default. In response to this, Phil Spencer put out a Microsoft blog post entitled "Gaming for Everyone Everywhere: Our View on the Activision Blizzard Acquisition." In this, he ended up saying a lot. They talked a lot about how they recognize that games should be played on all platforms and should be accessible to as many gamers as possible. They also said some things in here about how franchises like Call of Duty, Diablo, and Overwatch were all planned on going to the Game Pass if this deal were to go through, making it even more accessible for more gamers to have that access to these franchises and to be able to experience them the way that others have in the past. And I don't know if this is just me, and I'm even normally leaning towards Microsoft's side here throughout these investigations, but I feel like that's almost not a response to what's being talked about. They're talking about how it might lessen competition in the market, and Microsoft's response has essentially been, but we're gonna put it on Game Pass and more people will be able to play the games. And I feel like they're kind of dancing around the issue a little bit and trying to just hype up their own product to kind of make themselves look better. It almost seems like more of a PR stunt than a direct response to the questions being asked, but maybe that's just me. But where I find that the other side of the argument can be a little faulty is mostly when Sony starts to step in and complain about how Microsoft making these franchises exclusive to their platform is going to very negatively impact their business and make it hard for them to compete in the market. And I and many others find this incredibly funny because Sony, in their gaming side of their brand, in the PlayStation side of it, has essentially built up their company on exclusive deals with studios. They buy studios to develop games that will only ever be sold on PlayStation. Now, that's not entirely true anymore. Now that more and more of the Sony exclusive catalog is being moved to PC, they're buying entire studios just to focus on those ports. I still feel very strongly about making this point though, because even though they are working more and more to put these games on PC, they are still not gonna put these games on Xbox. They are directly going into competition with Microsoft because these games aren't being sold on the Microsoft Store. They aren't being sold directly through Windows. They're being sold through other vendors like Steam or Epic Games in the case of very few releases such as the Final Fantasy VII Remake. So despite the fact that they are starting to move away from just selling these games on PlayStation, they are still strictly keeping them off of Microsoft's platform, off of Nintendo's platform, etc. They're still keeping it mostly to themselves. PC gamers are able to participate in playing those games now, but I feel that that's only because it doesn't help their direct competitors. It only helps them get more sales through a second platform. And obviously throughout all of this, one of the biggest concerns of the PlayStation team is the Call of Duty franchise, who since 2015 has been developing timed exclusive content for the PlayStation brand. And way back in 2015, that content was a month exclusive at a time, but in the last couple of years has been a whole year exclusive. It has been nearly 365 days of these modes only existing on the PlayStation platform. Obviously, if Microsoft buys Activision, not only will they lose this, but with talks of Call of Duty going to Game Pass and obviously becoming exclusive, they worry a lot that they won't be able to sell Call of Duty at all through their digital storefront. They also, of course, worry that this will drive more and more players to buy an Xbox over a PlayStation, because if you can't play Call of Duty, why would you buy a PlayStation? To a lot of more dedicated gamers, this might seem like a bit of a redundant thing, like this might not seem like the be-all end-all, but when you take into account the scope of the entire industry and the entire market, Call of Duty is and has been for a very, very long time the #1 best-selling franchise. It is the franchise that generates the most revenue in the industry, and it has been that franchise for over a decade, consistently every year, no exceptions. So that would be a really, really big loss on Sony's part. And with all that being said, one day after the Phase 2 investigation was announced, Tom Warren dropped an absolute bombshell of an article entitled "Microsoft will keep Call of Duty on PlayStation for several more years beyond existing deal." This, of course, is talking about Sony's marketing deal for the franchise that is set to expire in 2024, and the heads over at Microsoft promising that Call of Duty will still be sold on the PlayStation platform for, in quotes, several years after that. But now the question that's being proposed is, how long is several years? Is that something that we need to state? Because that could be very vague. You know, you could say several years all you want, but until it's in writing, that could be 2 years, that could be 5 years, that could be 7 years. Very small chance it's gonna be even 5 years, much less 7. But that could be a very short amount of time. And Sony and obviously the governments that are trying to decide whether or not this is beneficial to the economy of the gaming industry have a really hard time deciding if that's okay if they can't have a set amount of time to really look at, right? Like, if you don't know how long it's going to be on the platform for, you can't judge how much competition will or will not be in the market at any given time over the next few years. So that was a very interesting piece of media to release. Now, as of my recording, yesterday, CEO of Sony Entertainment, Jim Ryan, has come out and said that Microsoft's proposal to keep Call of Duty on PlayStation is inadequate on many levels. And in it, he actually doesn't look as bad as you might expect, because obviously Sony's kind of on the back foot in all this, especially with how they've built up their own gaming brand over the last few years. But he said things such as, and I quote, "I hadn't intended to comment on what I understood to be a private business discussion, but I feel the need to set the record straight because Phil Spencer brought this into the public forum." So when you start saying things like that, it obviously puts the heads of Xbox in a really bad spot, at least in terms of their public image, because apparently this was agreed upon to be a private business discussion, and then Phil Spencer went and just spoke to journalists about his plans and how he sees the whole situation playing out. And obviously, it's just not a good look for Microsoft in this case. I mean, at the end of the situation as of currently, on September 8th, 2022, I don't really feel completely set to either side. I do feel a little bit in Microsoft's favor still, even if, you know, it was very unprofessional to talk about their plans to journalists and the like publicly. I feel that it's perfectly fine for Microsoft to buy Activision Blizzard in this particular case, considering that the main pushback is coming from their direct competition, who again, for the last decade or so, has built up their entire gaming brand on purchasing studios to develop content exclusively for their platform. As much as I don't want to use the word, I do see it as highly hypocritical of Sony's leadership to try to complain and, you know, beg governments to not let this go through because they feel that it's unfair to them and it's unfair competition-wise in the market. But like, that's exactly what they've been doing for the last 10 years. You know, it's just as soon as Microsoft wants to buy essentially the biggest publisher in the industry, that's when Sony suddenly has a problem. That's when they feel that this is unethical and creates issues in terms of competition in the market. Again, I don't feel completely to one side or the other. I don't play on an Xbox or a PlayStation, so I have no stake in the console wars that somehow still go on, and I still see people on Twitter talking about which console is better, and it blows my mind, but at the end of the day, I don't side with one completely or the other. I feel that there's a lot of good reason to be on either side, although at the end of the day, I do side with Microsoft a little bit. You know, if you have an opinion, strong or not, about this, feel free to sound off in the comments. Again, I'm kind of making this video because I think that this is an interesting discussion. I think that this is a good one to have in the industry, and I would kind of like to know what everyone thinks, aside from just me and the few people I've seen talk about this on the internet up to this point. I would really genuinely like to know, so feel free to comment below what your thoughts are on the whole situation. Also, if you ended up enjoying this, feel free to help out with some engagement, some likes, some subs, whatever it might be. Obviously, the algorithm exists, so if you enjoyed the video, feel free to throw me a bone. Also, I haven't really said this in a video before, but we do have channel memberships now, so if you feel any sort of obligation to support the channel financially beyond just consuming the content, then feel free to go ahead and check that out. You can get memberships starting at as low as $2 a month USD. It really does help out a lot with funding the channel and giving me more time out of my day to create videos like this. So if you're feeling generous enough, check it out, otherwise no worries. But once again, I hope you guys enjoyed. I'm excited to hear your opinions. Thank you for watching the video. I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and goodbye.